Hey, what's up guys, it's Matt with the Movement System. In this video, we're gonna break down a one-on-one speed training session with NFL tight end Darren Waller. We're gonna show you the exact drills that he's working on, what he's doing to warm up, and what he's doing to build up to top speed. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so if you're gonna work on speed, you really need to start with a good, solid warm-up. The way you do your warm-up is going to influence the mechanics that you bring to your speed training. So we wanna make sure we're doing a solid warm-up, starting with things like A skips. We wanna be intentional with the way that we're doing these and the quick arm drive here. After working through a few sets of A skips, Darren's working into a lateral push-off. It's important to not just train your sagittal plane in the warm-up, but especially if you're going to be doing any change of direction work, you wanna be also warming up in the frontal plane with lateral movements as well. From here, just working into a pogo hop. A pogo hop is a really good exercise to include in the warm-up or the cool-down of any speed training drills. This is a good way to warm up the Achilles tendon to be able to get ready to stretch and shorten and handle higher demands and loads. You can do these forwards as well as backwards, just staying light on the feet and pushing through the ball of the foot there. After a solid warm-up, you can get into some technique and acceleration work. Now this will look different based on your sport and what you're training for. Darren's an NFL tight end, so he needs to be quick off the line, but also be able to get off the line with different foot positions and with different angles because he's gonna be running a bunch of different routes. In the past, he's had some issues with foot and ankle mobility, impacting his speed technique and his ability to push off of the ball of the foot to accelerate forward. If you don't have good mobility through your midfoot to be able to pronate and push off well, then you may actually end up turning your foot and losing or leaking some energy in that start. Now he actually addressed this with rehab exercises to help to learn to pronate the foot, to help to learn to push that knee forward. And now it's just about integrating it into speed drills so that way he's actually getting the benefit from that new mobility. A lot of athletes are taught just to push off of the back leg and not really worry about the front leg, but that's not always the best cue for athletes, especially if they're starting in a more upright position with their feet closer together. In that case, you can get a lot out of pushing off of the front foot. So Darren's working on accelerating with pushing off the back leg for some sets, as well as pushing off the front leg for some sets. Being able to push off and then very quickly move the feet and take steps can give you a lot of opportunity to change direction very quickly and lose a defender. Of course, this is important for a wide receiver or a tight end running routes in football, but this is also important for soccer athletes, for lacrosse athletes, for field hockey athletes, or even for a basketball player. So you can imagine taking these same drills and this same type of footwork and technique work and applying it to a different sport. Here's what some accelerations look like with the focus being pushing off of the front leg more so. What you can see is that we want a good body angle where the center of mass is forward and the arm is extending behind the hip and that we're getting good knee drive here. That knee drive, we don't want it to be up and over. We want that knee drive to be forward. Again, so that way we can keep the foot close to the ground and we can get in contact with the ground to change direction quickly if we need to. Acceleration mechanics should look very different than top speed mechanics. So with acceleration, that foot's gonna be staying closer to the ground, whereas at top speed, we're gonna have a bigger cyclical motion of the swing leg. These are all things that you can look out for if you're a coach working on speed or if you're an athlete working on your speed. There's also benefit to pushing off of the back leg, so this is something he's working as well. Darren was talking about how he may set up differently based on how the defender's playing and based on the route that he's running. So there are instances where he's gonna put that back foot back farther and he's gonna push off of it more in order to get more linear speed out of the start. This is really where he spent the majority of the session dialing in technique and looking from one repetition to the next at what was better, what was worse, and what he needed to improve. The next drill that he was working on was an A skip to acceleration, and this one he had a big difference between the first repetition and the last repetition. His natural tendency with this drill, with the A skip to drop and accelerate, was to put that back leg way far behind him and not really have a lot of force or ability to push off because that leg's already straight and extended all the way. When you're dropping to be able to change direction in the game, you need to keep your feet relatively close under your body with enough bend that you can actually push off the ground and move. So you can see after a few repetitions with some coaching, this was a lot better by the second and third repetition, and he was able to much more forcefully push off the ground and change direction. When we compare that first position to the last position, it was also a lot better for the Achilles tendon and the issues that he was having with the foot in the newer position because he's not really maximally stretching that Achilles all the way far behind him. Instead, he's keeping that load under his center of gravity a little bit better and able to push off again much better. If you happen to be working in the sports rehab space, then this is actually really exciting to see because this is something that he was working on with a tight end coach as well as a physical therapist to combine to work to a performance outcome. It's always good to see good communication there and have the athlete understand both sides. One thing that I wanted to mention is that this is a skill-based session and really not a lot of this work is very fatiguing. He's also lifting. This is in the off-season period. He's also lifting. He's also doing some other speed training with his other coaches. So this is really technique-based and more so based on optimizing his biomechanics and where he's loading the lower body. And it's definitely not about driving him into the ground with as many repetitions and as much fatiguing work as possible. So over an entire hour session, he's really only working on 4 to 8 main drills, and every drill is having enough rest in between of 2 to 3 minutes. And each drill has a buildup from 50, 60, 70% all the way up towards max speed, as well as enough rest between repetitions. If your goal is to work on speed and technique, I would really encourage you to program that way instead of just throwing a whole bunch of exercises into a session and hoping an athlete gets faster. All right, after all of that acceleration work that he was doing, then he was finally working up to top speed. Now you may be wondering, how many times per week should an athlete be working on top speed off season? Off season is generally a time period where athletes are not doing quite as much speed work and plyometrics and instead are spending more time on hypertrophy work and in the weight room. Although that's the priority, it's not 100% one or the other. In fact, off season, if an athlete can maintain hitting top speed at least once or twice per week, that's much more ideal and will decrease injury risk as he ramps up speed work into the preseason. If you're going from 0 to 5 times a week, that's a big jump to cover as you transition to the preseason. So if you can maintain a little bit of speed work off season, that's a good thing. Because you need a lot of time to build up to top speed, he was targeting the 30 to 35 yard line for top speed and then shutting it down right as he hit the 35 yard line. So 0 to 10 was just a slower acceleration and then a faster acceleration hitting top speed around that 30 yard line. Again, not a ton of total repetitions, just about 6 or 8 repetitions here where he's hitting near top speed with plenty of rest in between. Some things he was working on with top speed mechanics was actually getting better arm drive. This will look a little bit different for a football player than, for example, a sprinter. A sprinter tends to use more of an open hand technique and have a little bit more of a straight knee at top speed, whereas a football player like Darren, he actually tends to be a closed hand sprinter and tends to have slightly more knee bend at top speed. This is actually probably beneficial for him because he's going to need to change direction a lot, whereas sprinters really never have to change direction. So there are still some things he can work on with his technique, like getting better arm extension and getting the hand to clear the hip, and being efficient with the way that he's contacting the ground and the shin angle at contact, but we don't necessarily need to get him entirely looking like a 100-meter sprinter. Hopefully this breakdown was helpful for you and helped you learn something to help you get faster with your own speed training. If it was, make sure you go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, follow along on Instagram as well at The Movement System, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.